Good morning. My name's Abdul Hussein. I'm the son of Fazal Hussein. My nickname is Abby because all my English friends or people in this country call me Abby. It's easier. I'm the first Pakistani child in Swindon, and my father was the first Pakistani Muslim to come and settle in Swindon, 7th of April 1962. And my dad was in the Pakistani army, and Colonel Ghulam Hussain Shahid, who was basically his boss and knew my father extremely well. And he said to my father, he said that when you do leave the army, unfortunately, you won't be able to survive in Pakistan. For whatever reason, because my father being a soldier, he actually done all the paperwork for my father and brought him to England and settled him in Watchfield, which was military housing initially. And then once they arrived, he was only allowed to bring £5 with him at that time. And the first digs he had was number 6 Wellington Street. Unfortunately, that property is no longer there as times have moved on. Then he moved, this I'm talking about 1962 now, so he came to Swindon, lived at number 6 Wellington Street. Then he moved to number 10 Manchester Road. Then he moved to number 38 Alfred Street, which he purchased around about 1963 strokes 1964 time. And that's when we arrived. My mother arrived at that time because it was only me. And then my sister, she was born in Swindon at 38 Alfred Street. Basically, my father worked at Lister's, which was a diesel pump engineering factory in Rawton, which is no longer in existence. And in his latter years, he retired as a bus driver for Thamesdown buses, and sadly passed away on the 30th of December 2022. Swindon, when he first came here, there was no halal shop here. So he used to go to Swindon Town Market, buy a chicken, bring it home, slaughter it, clean it and cook it. Unfortunately, there wasn't any Asian shops also at that time that sold any halal products. Mr. Beddy had a shop in Beatrix Street, which was a great Asian shop, and he was a great gentleman. I could picture him right now, right in front of me. Done everything what he possibly could, but obviously halal in the 60s was a no-go, only whatever you can do, including bigger cities like Bradford, Huddersfield, or even Birmingham. It was difficult to get halal, So there used to be a shop in Swindon Town Centre, I believe called Dewhurst or something like that. Allegedly, it was owned by a Jewish family, which is kosher meat. But my father being my father, he wouldn't buy meat from there because technically they also sold pork as well, so we couldn't mix that together. Great memories. He was a very strict father. We had our typical Asian beatings. That great movie, East is East. It relates to me 100%, But on the other hand, going back to my father, being the first Muslim in Swindon, an English doctor had passed away in hospital at Princess Margaret Hospital, which no longer exists. And they came to our house, knocked the door and said to my father, can you come in, do a funeral? And in his broken English, he said, no, we don't do funerals for non-Muslims. And they said, no, this particular doctor, he's actually English, but he's Muslim. And on his will, or whatever he'd written down before he passed away, so they took my father to Princess Margaret Hospital, where he single-handedly washed, cleaned the body. And unfortunately, at that time in Swindon, no Muslims were allowed to be buried in Swindon at all, in any of the cemeteries. So they took my father to London with the body. He done the janazah, as we call it, funeral prayers, buried the person concerned, and they brought my father back to Swindon as well and provided a great service. He had been selected for jury service, which is a very rare thing, especially in the 60s, for an Asian person to be selected for jury service. And he declined it on the understanding that his English wasn't very good. He couldn't really read or write, apart from very basic, and so hence the jury service department at the time said to him, fine, you can be excused from the service, because obviously you need to understand fully before you can start saying yes, he's guilty, or no, he's not guilty. So it was very tough for him at that time in the 60s coming here. So when he bought 38 Alfred Street, every time he saw somebody who looked Asian, he said, my front door is always open for you. And Mr. Ahmed, who I'm pleased to say is still alive, one of his first friends, and he was also one of the first people to arrive in the 60s. I believe he arrived in March, but he arrived somewhere up north in Manchester area. And he was taking a train from Manchester to Swindon, going to Cardiff, Mr. Ahmed. And then he decided to get off at Swindon railway station. So he got off on the train, just walked round, couldn't find somebody, and he walked round and asking people, please, can you help me? Is there any Asians living here? And he said, yeah, there's an Indian chap lives in Medjbury Road, or Medjbury Street, which is in Rodbourne area. And it was a Sikh gentleman that was living here prior to my father. So I call him Mr. Ahmed my uncle, because I was a child growing up. So basically all the Asian people at that time, we call them uncles, a sign of respect. So my uncle was living with a Sikh family temporarily, until one day he bumped into my father and recognised him from the Pakistani passport office, because Mr. Ahmed, or my uncle Mr. Ahmed, comes from a city called Lahore, which is a very, very famous city at that time used to be India, now it's called Pakistan. And then he moved in with my father, then Mr. Butt, Mr. Mirza, and various, I can't remember the names of all of them, but we came here as a family in 1964, went back to Pakistan in 1967, came back November 20th, 1971, when Queen Elizabeth II came to Swindon and opened up the Wyvern Theatre. And there used to be a bridge that used to go across and I used to actually go to that school, which is Clarence Junior School. But prior to that, I used to go to Queenstown Infant School, which unfortunately, majority of these schools have closed down, and for whatever reason. So basically, it was very tough growing up in the 60s, 70s, and even the 80s, being of a minority group. First of all, you had to encounter too much racism. Probably I was quite privileged. I didn't really encounter that much racism, apart from good banter, good old-fashioned banter with schoolmates, basically. And, I'm sure there's lots of people like my father and people that came in the late 50s and the 60s that suffered a hell of a lot of racism. But they managed to, build the foundation for us in this great country that we're living in. I was actually born in a village called Fatehpur, which is near Jhelum in Pakistan.
Great. And what year was that?
That was 1962.
1962. Great,
Yeah.
great, perfect. Do you remember home a little bit?
No, it's all in me heart. I've never been back to that village. So in 1967, when we went back to Pakistan, my mother, I should clarify, is that she is a Pathan, which is a unique tribe, one of the beautiful tribes of Asia. And, my father was a Punjabi. So my father met my mother during the army, so in Peshawar, Kent. So that's where my father was based with Colonel Ghulam Hussain Shahid who passed away, like I said, in the 71 war. I believe my parents got married in 1958. So, basically, I grew up in a different village which is called Mora Potia. Mora Potia is more closer to Gujar Khan area, Slampura, Jabbar. So Fatehpur is near to Mangla Dam. It's very remote. There's probably only 2 houses that are there. And that was my grandfather's village, and his name was Sher Muhammad, and he actually built the mosque, which still stands in Fatehpur, and the cemetery himself. So his wife, or my first grandmother, that passed away, he built, he dug the grave himself, buried, and during the British Empire, or when the British ruled India, my grandfather, whose name I mentioned, Sher Muhammad, he was a policeman. And Sher means lion in Asian language. And he truly was a lion. He was allegedly 6'5" or something like that. Unfortunately, I've never seen him, and my father never saw him, because my father became an orphan at the age of 5, because his father passed away at a very young age. Coming to England, I always tell people, when our father came to Swindon and he settled in Swindon, I tell my friends and family members is that he brought us to England to be in a cooler country, so we weren't getting cooked back home. Right now, unfortunately, living here, the Asian sun has followed us, so we're even growing up as a child in this fantastic town, I love it, because I've had Afro-Caribbean friends, I've got English friends, Irish friends, Welsh friends, you name it, from all races. Unfortunately, some of my very, very good friends have passed away at a very young age, barely 60, and because of their lifestyle, unfortunately, that's the way some people decided to live, and they passed away, yeah. As a child growing up, in a tiny little house, 2-bedroom, mid-terrace, you don't really think of the properties, because, when you're 5, 6 years of age, or even 10 years of age, you still got the freedom. I mean, I had a family, Polish family and an Irish family, that lived in Volta Road. 3 brothers, 3 sisters, same as us, 6 of us and 6 of them, They used to come and grab me, take me away, and they'll come round and they say, "Mum, cook me a chapati and a paratha," or whatever, And they used to, we grew up, I didn't feel anything different, because you're a child. But I've heard from people like my father, it was like being cooped up in a rabbit hutch, because the environment, our houses back home are totally different style. Even the poorest man, he might have just a tin shack, but he's got the freedom of getting his bed out, we call it mungi, put it outside, and just sit there. A couple of friends come round, the wife makes a tea. The atmosphere of great family atmosphere of back home is totally different from the atmosphere of today. It's very different. Even brothers and sisters, we don't really socialise together like they did in the 60s. Like my father, he was a Pakistani. If he met a Sikh, it didn't bother him. He was his brother. He brought him round. We used to go to Alexandra Street. There was a Hindu family, and they used to cook chapatis like this, tiny little chapatis, and she had to cook a mountain just for one of my uncles to eat. But it was great times. And all the kids, whether they were Sikhs, Hindus, Muslims, Christians, we didn't look at them like there was any different. I've got great Sikh friends, Mother family. Unfortunately, uncle's passed away now, Mr. Mother. A great gentleman, very well involved with the Sikh community in Swindon, but unfortunately he's passed away. His wife's passed away as well. Excellent family. There's so many other Sikh uncles that have passed away because I used to call them uncles. Unfortunately, I can't remember I don't know their names, because it was typical. Uncle Jigiale, it's just one of those things. You grew up, we. I mean, I remember. I think we'd done a bus, Rhymes's coaches or something. We hired a coach, all the Asian families, and we went down to Weymouth. It was all 10, 11, and all the aunties, and including my mum, Barates and Undies and Harndies and flasks and tiffins, and we're down on the Weymouth beach. So me being a little bit intelligent, I said, if any of us get lost, you see this big red clock, just come here. And now as an adult, I know it's called a Jubilee clock. So, from Queen Victoria time. So that was our meeting point, because beach, you go down, you turn a couple of turns, and so many people walk past, you get lost, so remember the Jubilee clock. And we used to have great times. We go to Longleat Safari Park or West Midlands and London Zoo as families, 5, 6 cars and 10 up in each car, nobody worried about insurance or how many kids are in the car, you open the boot and somebody will bloody pop out. You think, where the hell did he come from, But we had a great laugh, we had a great laugh. The beauty was that my father, although he was extremely strict, very, very strict and very orthodox religious person, and I started to grow up, and I started to not fight, but debate with him. I said, now we're living in this country, and my ambition was to follow my father's footsteps, to go into some form of military. Obviously, I couldn't go to Pakistani military because, first of all, I didn't know the language that well. I mean, I do know my language, but I couldn't read or write. I could read and write English. So I wanted to join the British Navy, because majority of my school friends, or the friends that I went to school with, they joined the British Navy. So that was my ambition. So I went and joined the Sea Cadets. Half-heartedly, my father was happy. I was sort of integrating with people and bits and pieces. And I've been very privileged to go to top secret bases here in the UK, which not many people of high society are allowed to go and visit. And integrating, was an easy enough for me, because as far as I was concerned, if I wanted to play football, I went and played football. If I wanted to play rugby, which I was no good at, I always got battered because I'm a weakling. Cross-country running, that wasn't a problem, because you just dived in the hedge, had a couple of puffs on the old smoke, and then legged it, round the corner and back at school, But those were, I think it's how you choose your life. You've also got to make an effort with your neighbours. One of the houses I lived in, Aldine, the guy next door, he was a bit of a racist guy, until I started turning up with big flashy cars, which Princess Diana and people like that have, who came to Swindon in this one of these buildings when she opened it, And my car was actually here, one of the Daimlers, that I'd purchased, especially for that particular function, So I put it in the show. There is pictures with the Evening Advertiser or something with my vehicle. I'm not a very photogenic person, so I was used to steer clear of all those sort of things. But integrating, one of the gentlemen, I run a chauffeur business for 30 years in London, and one of the gentlemen that actually came and worked with me, I always say worked with me, although I was his boss technically speaking, his name was James Michael Carlisle, MVO. He was head of transport for the royal household for 14 years. So, everything at the royal, anything to do with the late Queen, and even the current prince who became a king now, he dealt with everything. Princess Anne, all the the transport side of it. And when he came and he said to me, remember one thing, don't tell people you're Abdul Hussein, because racism still exists, So that's hence the name Abby comes from, So I just say, good morning or good afternoon, Abby, chauffeur services, how can I help you, And as soon as they couldn't tell a difference, if I was English or, Cockney or, however my accent comes out. So I managed to, as we call it, gift of the gab, I managed to get lots of contracts with top 100 blue chip companies. And the name of my company was Abbey Chauffeur Services. You know, football players, like I said, RSA Films, you know, Ridley Scott, all these people, Orlando Bloom, you know, I mean, we've driven so many celebrities, I can't even remember all of them. You know, I've probably got it somewhere.
And do you still live in Swindon? Or you live in
I've always lived in Swindon. I've lived in Maida Vale, I've lived in Kensington, I've lived in Uxbridge, I've lived in Hayes, I've lived in Ashford in Middlesex, I've lived in Langley, Slough, and I've lived in Slough. You know, so that's just a few of the places that I've lived around London area while I was working up and down, you know. And not all my properties, you know, that was just digs, but few of them were my properties. Because I actually, my first house was in Freshbrook in 1984 that I bought that, 50 Wakefield Close. Then I moved to Thorne Road, Eldine. Then I moved to, you know, during the recession, lost everything. I went into social housing, which is council housing. I lived in Penhill, 134 Penhill Drive. Then I was fortunate enough to move to Liddington with a lovely house, which we done up as a family. I believe when I sold it, it was the most expensive ex-council house at that time. And you're never going to believe this. It's just recently been sold a couple of months ago for 500,000, the same house, right? And I believe it still holds a record for being the most expensive ex-council house sold in Swindon or Liddington. My youngest son, he's 40, well, just over 40 now. His mother's English, but as a typical old-fashioned Asian, although I came here as a very young person, I sort of chose my son's name. I called him Tariq Hussein. Now, because that's what I wanted to call him, you know, I thought that's a great name, Tariq, which means defender of the faith and all this, that, the other. Anyway, he's about 6'2". He holds a triple jump record still in Swindon for Dorking School that he went to. You know, great athlete, extremely well mannered. He was a captain of the cricket team, football team, rugby team, and he loved football. He loved football so much that, you know, Monday to Friday, never missed a day off school. He still holds a record. Saturday and Sunday was football. Don't matter, youth, you know, I took him all over the place for football. One year, there was a football game at Swindon Town Football Club, and he scored from the halfway line, just like David Beckham or Michael Owen or all the great players of today. Do you know what? The Swindon Town management got up and walked out, because that's what you call racism. You know, I've still, that hurts me, because my son, born and bred in Swindon, rated by lots of people and players of his age as the best midfield player in southwest of England. We went to trials in Somerset, but because his name was Tariq Hussein, couldn't make it. And he's 40 now. You know, so that's different. So racism has come a long way, because Swindon Town now have Muslim and Asian and Arab football players, thanks to clubs like Manchester City, Manchester United, you know, Liverpool, for bringing these great football players. I mean, the very first Asian football player that I can remember, a Pakistani, by the way, played for Bradford City, but nobody ever heard of him. You know, nobody knows him. But unfortunately, that's the way it is. So I hope we've moved forward now, and you know, hopefully. But his time has passed. He said, "All right, Dad, I can't be a football player. I'll join the police force." I said, "Brilliant. Let me organise it." So I arranged it. We went all the way to Devizes, police headquarters, met the superintendent, sat there, spoke everything, and he said he needs to get a bit more life experience. And that also hurt me, because I thought, here's a 16, 17-year-old young lad, extremely well-mannered, never been in trouble with the police, wants to join the police force. Superintendent at Wiltshire Devizes Constabulary tells him he needs to get life experience. And I thought to myself, my son's got a certificate at home which is approved by, you could say, the SAS, that he could have joined any British military force, Army, Navy, Air Force, in any department. And he's got a certificate at home that he passed down in, they call it the Brecon Beacons or wherever it is. He went on a military training course, and he came top. So they don't just dish out those certificates for every Tom, Dick and Harry, And he couldn't join the Wiltshire Constabulary. Anyway, he's working at TE Technologies, earning a great little wedge and, living a life. And I've got 2 beautiful grandkids from him. Well, it is my daughter-in-law. And by the way, she's a special needs school teacher, and she's English in Rawton. My first wife, she was my cousin. She unfortunately last year got shot in Pakistan over a dispute over property. Relatives basically stole her house and transferred it in their name. She went back, spent all her money, court cases, won the court case. Just say today, she won the court case this Friday, and by the following Friday, she was executed by our own relatives, shot through the head. So my 2 oldest sons that were there, especially my number 2 son, it was a great shock to see his mother being shot dead and seeing her, in hospital. So, back home, as we love it, but our relatives, unfortunately, it's called greed, So my 2 sons, one lives in Liverpool, the oldest one. My second son lives in County Road. And my third son, or the son from my English wife, lives in Nythe. I was, the black sheep of the family. So when they took me to Pakistan on the pretext that I was just going to visit family and go and see me grave of my grandmother and bits and pieces, which was in 1979, once we arrived there, my mother's took the passport. She said, you ain't going back to England, unless you get married. So I said, not a problem. When you're young, the blood is extremely hot. So I said, fine, let's get it on then. So I got married. I said, remember one thing, I'm still going to marry a Geordie when I get back. So, words sometimes come true, but it was probably the stubbornness or the arrogance of that is genetic. And believe it or not, the girl that I actually married at the time, her family, her older sister, was a family friend for years before. And I didn't even know she had other brothers and sisters. Until I took my eldest son and all my nephews and nieces came to 17 Westcott Place, because that was a great house for all the family to gather. And we used to have a big fair in Wooden Road, here, just down the road here. And I was walking around the fun fair, and that's when I met, I call her Sister Sue, I call her my sis, and I met her, and she said, oh, what are you doing? I said, I brought my nephews and my kids to the fun fair. And then I bumped into, her 2 sisters at the time. There's a big English family, And that's how when my ex-wife now, she actually worked for a co-op insurance, I believe, up in Old Town. I'm a Pakistani here, but I am British. There's no doubts about it. I love living in this country. I mean, it's a phenomenal country. I've got no qualms about it. Politics is politics, religion is religion. And one of the before I owned my chauffeur business, I actually worked for a Jewish lady. I walked into the office, I said, good morning, ma'am. She thought I called her mum. She said, listen, I'm not your mum. I'm a lesbian. I'm Jewish. I drink. I eat pork. I said, that's fine, Mum. You could do whatever you want. I'll still call you Mum. Instead of Mom, I called her Mum. So she said, all right, I'm going to call you son. And she said, okay. She used to have a contract with a company called Glaxo, which is a pharmaceutical company at the time, which, you know, I haven't got time for to discuss the whole scenario about it. But basically what she said, remember this, no religion and no politics. Talk about everything else, but don't discuss religion and politics, because that's the only thing that'll get you in trouble. To be yourself, be honest, be truthful, don't be afraid of nobody. If you got a question, speak it, and speak it nicely with your parents, with your older brothers and sisters. Don't be shy to come and talk to anybody. Don't think we're old fuddy-duddies, just like I used to think. You know, my dad don't know nothing, my mum don't know nothing. They've been through all that. That's why we've got here. You know, same as me. I've been there, done it, got a T-shirt. So don't be afraid. Just come and mix, integrate, and there is no such thing as unhappiness. A smile is very important. It's just great for people like you, especially now, making, you know, or documenting history.
Yeah.
You know, I remember watching a documented history about a Pakistani guy walked from Pakistan to Norway. And do you know what? They still got his shoes in the museum.
Wow.
So that's the difference between,
Yeah.
you know, and today we're getting that privilege, 60 years on basically.
Yeah.
You know, minimum of 60 years on that we're
Yeah.
getting this privilege,
Yeah.
realistically, to be documented.
Yeah.
People like my father and my uncles that came
Yeah.
and struggled
Yeah, that's
and
right.
struggled.
That's right.
And not only did they struggle, they fed the whole family back home. So you imagine getting paid £5 or £7.50 or £13.20 or whatever you got paid in those days. You had to send money back home, fed your mothers and your uncles and your aunties and their kids and grandkids and whatever, you know, and still survived here. Still survived here and raising your family. You know, so it's a great. I mean, unfortunately, I mean, today, you know, kids are coming to the parents and saying, "Can you give me a tenner for a week?" You know, and you're thinking, "Well, hang on a minute." You know, I left home when I was 15 and I started working. You know, I walked in the factory. He said, "You do a bit of piecework." I said, "Yeah." I said, "Give me £1 for today. I ain't coming back tomorrow." You know, because that's when jobs were plenty.
Yeah.
Still is jobs are plenty, but you've got to be willing to go out and work for it.
Yeah.